Welcome back to Old School Sports. And as many of you know, it is Out of the Park 25 release day. The release day was a little bit delayed, but I've had the game for around an hour now. Just started poking around after downloading it and getting it installed, and real excited to dig into OOTP 25. For those of you who have followed us over the years, I am no less a deadbeat this year than I was a year ago. I still have the opportunity to often work from home on Fridays, so I let my colleagues and my boss at work know today that I would be taking the day off, but I did not let my family know that I would be taking the day off, which has allowed me to sequester myself into my home office and spend the day working on OOTP. Put out another OOTP 24 video this morning with our 10-month-long series on an expansion team, the Buffalo Wings. So if you haven't checked that out, feel free to check that out at our YouTube site, which you've obviously already found if you are watching this video. And in today's video, I'm going to probably be doing a number of relatively brief tutorials over the next couple of days, just kind of exploring the new game, poking around with some of the new features, and sharing content with those of you who are still deciding whether you want to purchase the new version of the game or not. But today we're going to repeat a video that we did a year ago and just look at some of the different trade settings. Hopefully this will allow you to figure out what type of trade settings you want to play the game in. Since I am a New York Yankees fan, we are going to start with the New York Yankees. We've set up this game to have 100% accuracy as far as scouting. And we're going to look basically just at trading difficulty for most players, middle 3/4 of the way up and then all the way at the hard level. Clearly, things will be much easier if you're playing with the easiest settings. We will kind of look at them with one player just to kind of see how much easier they are. And hopefully we'll dig through a few players and you'll find things useful as far as framing in the type of options that you'll get in return offered to you from other teams. And hopefully it'll let you decide what type of trade setting you want to play on here in OOTP 25. And the first player we're going to look at is Anthony Volpe. Going to look at a young, inexpensive, valuable player. Gold Glove winner already, even though he's not yet 23 years old. Great personality. And you'll notice, if you're familiar with OOTP, and there's been a lot of talk about this on the forums, that the contact rating is now broken down into the BABIP and the avoid strikeout components. So a little bit of a different look for the basic batting ratings here. And then still gap power, power, and eye. You can toggle that on and off. I'm kind of interested in seeing it when I'm making some decisions. So we will go and shop Mr. Volpe around, and you can see I've still got the screen tutorials on here, even though they look pretty familiar to previous seasons. So we'll shop Volpe, and we're right at the average trade setting now, and see what the options are out there for him. Probably the easiest way to do this is to just pick a team that we think has interesting offers to him and see what they offer now versus the more difficult settings to help frame things in as to how the game is valuing him and how the AI for trade offers works at different levels. And I know that the star ratings can be simplistic and some people don't like them, but I'm just setting up the game now and it's a simple frame of reference. So looking here at the average trade setting, the Pittsburgh Pirates offer a player as high as 4 stars with the reliever David Bednar. Prospect Henry Davis, who we think can still become a better catcher, came up last year. Ke'Bryan Hayes, an established third baseman at this point, who is also signed to what could be a relatively team-friendly contract excellent defender with a decent bat. Gold Glove winner like Anthony Volpe. O'Neal Cruz, young shortstop. Don't think he's as good as Volpe, but we could get him for Volpe. And then Jack Sawinski, a center fielder, decent prospect, pretty good power, pretty good eye, good outfield range. Obviously had a solid power year last year for the Pirates with 26 homers, but that 224 average is not exceptional. So some decent talent that we could get straight up for Volpe. Honestly, I don't think I would make any of these trades, but I am also biased for Mr. Volpe as pretty close to a homegrown Yankee who always wanted to play for the team. But definitely some interesting opportunities if we needed a catcher, if we wanted a power hitting outfield prospect, if we needed a closer for some reason. There are certainly some options there for Volpe. So we've cranked the trade difficulty up to about 75%, another 5 notches, and you can see a little bit less attractive offers from the Pirates. Bednar, Cruz, and Sawinski are still there, but the young catcher Davis and the Gold Glove third baseman Ke'Bryan Hayes are gone, replaced with another catcher, Ali Sanchez. Very good defensively, not much of a bat, and certainly older than Davis. And then Edward Olivares, right fielder, decent prospect, looks like a pretty solid 4th or 5th outfielder, probably not an ideal starter. So a little bit less attractive in terms of the opportunity set when you crank things up to 75% trade difficulty. And now moving on to the highest trade setting, only 2 of the original players are still on the list. David Bednar, the solid reliever, making $4.5 million, so that could be Pittsburgh, given their financial constraints, we may want to move him on. O'Neal Cruz still on the list from last time around. Ali Sanchez on the list, and now some older guys. Yasmani Grandal, good solid veteran catcher, making $2.5 million. Certainly don't think the Yankees would give up a 22-year-old potential star of the future for him. And then Jared Triolo, third baseman, 26 years old, decent glove, okay bat. Don't love the lack of power and the mediocre speed. And you can see here with speed, there is a little more nuance this year, in that you can see stealing aggressiveness as well as stealing ability, rather than just one speed rating that you used to see on the general screen. So certainly a difference to me. Not a huge difference, as you can see. I mean, there's 2 guys on the hardest setting in Bednar and Cruz who were on the average setting as well. The other ancillary people are definitely a little older, not as high potential, and in some cases more expensive than in the initial offer at the base level, but not, quite honestly, a massive difference between the average setting and the highest difficulty setting for what we could get back in return for Volpe. And last but not least, and we'll do this just for Volpe, since he probably has as high trade value of anyone in the Yankees organization, we move things down to the easiest trade setting. And you can still see 4 of the same 5 names from the average setting: Bednar, Hayes, Cruz, and Sawinski on the list. They took out the catcher, Henry Davis, and then they added in the veteran left fielder, Brian Reynolds. Kind of interesting because Reynolds, before he did ultimately sign that extension in Pittsburgh, is a player who the Yankees were always rumored to be sniffing around and interested in bringing onto the team to help their outfield over the past few years. So this seems like another one where the Yankees could get an established veteran in return for Volpe. Again, I don't think the Yankees would actually make any of these trades, but this is just an example of the easiest levels. You can see there's a few more higher end players available. I didn't scroll through all of this on the base level when I first looked at it, but there are a few more 3.5 and 4-star potential players available at the easiest trade setting, but still not a massive difference between this and even the hardest setting. Some of the names show up as trade offers on all four. So I know people get stressed out about trade settings and they think that it makes a massive difference, but quite honestly, we've seen here that you can get David Bednar or O'Neill Cruz straight up for Anthony Volpe, whether you are playing at the easiest trade setting or the hardest trade setting. So there's some differences, but honestly, I think this might be something that sometimes as players of the game, we stress out a little bit more than we need to and think perhaps that it's maybe even more important than it really is. And we've moved ahead a day so we can do all of our shopping of players on the same day for them. And we've moved on to more of an established veteran on a decent contract, and that would be the starting pitcher, Nestor Cortes. You can see here, similar to the more granular detail this year on the batting cards, same thing on the pitching ratings. Movement is now broken into home runs allowed based on the movement of the pitcher or how that feeds into the movement of the pitcher, and then also the expected pitcher BABIP. You can see solid ratings for Cortes, a solid 4-pitch arsenal, average stuff, average movement, well above average control. Making a little less than $4 million this year, still going to be arbitration eligible next year. Should not, I don't think, have as much value as an Anthony Volpe, but we will find out shortly. We've set the trade setting back to the middle here and shopping around Mr. Cortes. You can see still a lot of offers out there. And taking a look at what the Pirates would offer for Nestor Cortes, you can see it's definitely a lower end offer than what we got or were offered more accurately for Volpe at the average trade setting. Some players making some decent money. Mitch Keller kind of making similar money to Cortes, and he is not as good a pitcher. A little younger, but certainly that doesn't seem that attractive. Veteran catcher, he is Manny Grandal. Ali Sanchez, a familiar name from Volpe. Triolo, also a familiar name. And then another veteran, Andrew McCutchen, making some pretty significant money. Does have that captain personality, but certainly not as attractive as the offers we got for Volpe on the average trade setting. And at 75% of max for the trade difficulty, so 5 notches up from where we were before. Very similar list. The only one who was removed from it that was on it before was the veteran pitcher Keller, and he was replaced with a left fielder, Josh Palacios, 28-year-old, looks pretty much like a replacement level kind of major league player. So a little less interesting because Keller does have some value to many major league teams with his profile. I think Palacios tends to have a little less value than him. And at the hardest trade setting, just one player swapped in. That's the right fielder, Connor Joe, another guy who's, kind of a replacement level, maybe a little bit above replacement level, making $2 million. So he is in the mix now. If you've been looking closely at the line between us, Robert Suarez is still being offered by the Padres, so that shows that they view the $10 million this year, followed by 2 or 3 years of $8 million as a relatively unattractive contract for them that they'd like to get rid of, given his very mediocre stuff. You may have also noticed that Yu Darvish was being offered in the first 2 deals at the medium and the 75% setting, and at the hardest setting, we were unable to even get Darvish, even though he, I think to some degree, is probably viewed by the Padres as a salary dump. And just for the heck of it, I went and looked at the easiest trade setting for Nestor Cortes. And kind of interesting, the easiest trade setting for Cortes with Keller, Grandal, Sanchez, Triolo, and McCutchen is exactly the same list that they offered for him at the average trade setting. And you can see Darvish and Suarez, who, with the exception of Darvish, were on all three of the other trade settings we looked at, are also who San Diego would offer here too. So again, not tons of variation for a player like Cortes in terms of what you'll get in trade with the different trade settings. So we've moved ahead another day, and you probably knew where this was going. Giancarlo Stanton, what can we get for him? And it would be a pure salary dump by the Yankees. You see, he's not even willing to consider a trade to Pittsburgh. I don't think they would have the finances to bring him on board anyways. Not sure what, if anything, we're going to see here with the 4 different trade settings we've been using. We're back at the average trade setting. I tend to think we may get a bunch of zeros on this from everybody at all of the different trade settings, and we may have to run another one tomorrow where the Yankees are keeping and retaining a large part of his contract, but we'll try to be hopeful. If the Yankees wanted to move off of Giancarlo's contract, again, we're at the average trade setting here. And not surprisingly, nobody offered for him at the average trade setting. So I think that kinds of tell us that we're not going to get any offers at the 75% or the 100% difficulty trade settings as well. But we'll take a stab at the easiest trade setting and see if maybe there's something there for Stanton. And we've switched things back or down to the easiest trade setting. We will shop Stanton around here. I'm guessing it's still going to be nothing. Yeah, so I mean, here's a good example. Stanton's contract is so bad. Doesn't matter if you're on the easiest trade setting, a middle trade setting, or the hardest trade setting, nobody's going to touch it. So the next step is to see if there's anything going and any differences if the Yankees are willing to retain 50% of his contract. And while doing that, we might as well just keep things here on the easiest trade setting. And if the Yankees were to keep 50% of his contract on the easiest trade setting, still nothing at all going, we'll pop it up to 80% on the easiest trade setting. And there are some offers at 80% on the easiest trade setting. Probably going to want to look at the offers from a larger market team that really could afford more to take him on. Looking at the Dodgers, you can see we've got to take back some money in return and retain 80% of his contract. And even at the easiest trade setting, Austin Barnes, kind of a replacement level backup catcher, decent defense. And I know I've talked about the difference in terms of what you see in terms of batting ratings, pitching ratings, and speed this year. And you can see right here also catcher, the defensive rating. You get a separate blocking and framing right now. That's kind of broken out into those two components. And then you can see the catcher arm separately. So again, more nuance this year than less. Chris Taylor, the veteran third baseman, also offered straight up. He has a contract for another 2 to 3 seasons that you'd be taking on board from the Dodgers. And then Miguel Rojas, the veteran shortstop, still a solid defender, 1-year contract with a team option. But again, this is retaining 80% of Stanton's contract, and this is still at the easiest level. So in the next time we're talking about this, we'll be at the average level and see how different it looks, if at all. And interestingly, just bumping up to the average trade setting, no one offering anything in return for Stanton. So unless you're playing at the easiest settings, or unless you're willing to retain over 80% of Stanton's contract, or unless you're willing to include a pretty valuable asset with him, which is the final thing we'll look at. It seems like it's going to be pretty hard to get this contract off the books for the Yankees, which is fair and, in my view, accurate, because I think in real life it would be pretty darn difficult for the Yankees to get Stanton off the books. So we've simmed ahead another day. We're still on the average trade setting, and we're going to see what would happen if the Yankees try to retain half of Stanton's contract and also throw in the highest potential prospect in their farm system in young Jason Dominguez. And unfortunately, I have my settings right now where injured players are not eligible to be dealt. I told you I was playing around with the settings here for the first time, so I will need to address that. Allow trading of injured players is now on. So if we go back to Mr. Stanton and we try to shop him and we try to add in Mr. Dominguez, we'll see with 50% retention and an average trade difficulty whether that's a little more alluring to the other teams out there. No one cares, even at the average trade setting, if you include Jason Dominguez. So we're going to knock it down to the easiest trade setting and see if there's anything to do there. All right, we're keeping it at 50% retention. We're including Jason Dominguez, and we've set things down to the easiest trade setting possible. And there are offers here, as you can see. A lot of those offers still involve taking what could be large and not necessarily interesting contracts back. In fact, you can see it is entirely that. Does give the opportunity for the Yankees to get out of Stanton's contract. I mean, they've got to keep half of it, but still opening up $12.5 to $16 million a year for the next 4 years. Now, again, in return, they're taking back, in some cases, multiple-year bad contracts with big numbers. If you were just looking purely for the financial impact and opening it up as much possible to the Yankees, you'd probably just go with the $8 million contract from the Astros for Kendall Graveman, who's going to be out this entire season. So you're basically taking $8 million back, which gets rid of half of what you're saving this year, but then you will be saving half of Stanton's contract in 25, 26, and 27. But you're also giving up the best prospect in your system. So even at the easiest trade setting possible, and even with keeping 50% of Stanton's contract, you basically have to include Dominguez, and you're not really getting anything valuable in return. It's just a matter of how bad of a contract do you want to take on in return, and none of those contracts are as potentially bad as Stanton's. I am a bit surprised that he's only fragile at this point in terms of his injury proneness. I thought there was a chance he might be wrecked, but at least he still has that power to hit home runs, because it looks like if you're managing the Yankees, you're most likely going to be living with that Stanton contract for another couple of seasons. I'm thinking it might get a little easier to trade once there's only a year or two left on it. And with that, we're going to call it an episode. As I kind of talked about, it doesn't seem like there is actually a massive difference between the easiest level and the hardest level when kind of trading a good young player like Volpe or an established solid major leaguer like Cortes. Definitely was easier to potentially get out of the Stanton contract at the easiest level. It basically seemed impossible at the harder levels to get out of that contract. But even at the easiest level, it was not a slam dunk for the Yankees. They were still going to be retaining a good chunk of his contract and also giving up a top prospect to get it done. So I think from that perspective, I do like the fact that you can't just totally swindle the AI in terms of dumping your bad contracts. I'm sure we'll be all learning more about this in the coming weeks and months and year. Hope this first look at some of the new screens for batters and pitchers and fielders was helpful. And also hope kind of framing in the different difficulties for trading and the potential returns is also helpful to you as you try to think of how you want to set up your new game in OOTP 25. Until our next tutorial, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.